if you can put up with a little extra rain, it's really a perfect place to be. And I didn't say that because I don't want anyone else to move here.
No, it's not too cold. It's not too cold right now. I always assumed it would be like super frigid up there at this time of year.
No, in fact, we had a very mild winter. We just got snow here for the first time. It came and went over a weekend, but we're probably one and done for any kind of cold weather. In fact, I was mentioning last month in January how usually parking your cars outside, you might want to put a cover over your windshield so it doesn't freeze. For the maybe 1 month of the year that it gets that cold. We had maybe 2 or 3 days of weather that you would even need that for this year. So it's definitely getting warmer here.
Yeah.
And it has done over the last 10 years. It's really noticeable. Ask anybody who's been in here, for any length of time. Our climate is definitely changing.
I read a terrifying article a while back. I think it was in the New Yorker that was like predicting a crazy earthquake up in the Pacific Northwest that would like totally obliterate like Washington and Oregon, and like a tsunami would just wipe out everything in the West Coast. Have you heard about that, or know if there's any legitimacy?
I haven't heard about a giant earthquake. I mean, we're definitely on fault lines. We do get we're a very seismically active area. We don't get big earthquakes often. I think I can remember 2 or 3 in the last 20 years that you've actually felt and everybody went, whoa, but not even any kind of property damaging. But just minor tremors all the time that are being recorded by the local scientists. What people are saying around here is that Mount Rainier is probably going to blow sometime in the next, I don't know, maybe 100 years.
Oh, wow.
So on a geological timeline, that's tiny. So who knows? We're not in danger now, but of course, we had 30 years ago, we had 40 years ago, we had Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, Jason, I guess for anyone that's not aware, like I said, we spoke to you a little back in this channel's history when you were running for Congress, and now you're running again for the same seat against the same incumbent. Can you remind me of his name? I forget his name.
Well, everybody forgets his name because he's a nobody, but his name's Rick Larsen. And I say that, kind of tongue in cheek, because he actually is one of the least effective and least present members of Congress in terms of introducing legislation and going on the floor. I mean, he's really a seat warmer and a kind of a corporate lackey who is in there to, nose under the radar and just do the business of industry.
Yeah, that's kind of a recurring theme, right? It's one of those weird things where once you get into Congress, right, you can kind of just, twiddle your thumbs for 20 years or so, right? And nobody seems to call you on it. They just kind of check the box on you. Do you think that's a dynamic that's starting to change? We just talked to Shervin Azami. He's running in West San Fernando Valley for Congress. Yep. He's running against Brad Sherman. And we've just kind of talked about how, there has to be a time where the chickens come home for roost. Like, you can't spend 20 years in Congress representing your constituents and, only change the name of a post office, right? You have to be, actually pushing legislation, actually making change. But it seems for so long, our congressional representatives have just been let off the hook. Do you think that's starting to change?
Well, I mean, I do think it's starting to change, but we gotta remember these people were elected to do exactly what they're doing, which is to slow down anything progressive, to make sure that their industry benefactors are getting all of the tax breaks and the contracts and the kickbacks that they're basically purchasing them for. And I say purchasing them because a guy like Rick Larsen, he gets 75% of his funding from corporate interests. He's got money coming in from the military industrial complex. Of course, we got 2 naval bases here in this district. Got money coming in from the transportation, particularly the aviation industry. How interesting. He is the chair of the aviation subcommittee. And we've got Boeing right here in our district. But as you know, Boeing has been given tax break after tax break after benefit from both the state and federal governments. And they're still going to pack up shop with the new jetliner and take it to South Carolina. So all of these concessions that we gave to Boeing to get them to stay here and to provide those jobs. I mean, not that we don't want Boeing to be a better company. We want them to be more environmentally conscious, but also we want our workforce to have their jobs here. But this happens all the time. That you feed these corporations, and because we're not a right to work state and South Carolina is, it's simply much more business friendly. So they take all of our tax incentives and then they get on the road somewhere else anyway.
Yeah, well, that's one of the most.
there to just maintain that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I don't know about this specifically. I know that here in Missouri, we were able to stave off right to work as of yet. Although just when Josh Hawley was running, that was one of his things that he was actually running on, the faux populist himself. But I'm wondering, is there a way at a national level that we can take care of that and actually federally implement something from that would pass through Congress and the Senate that would make it basically illegal to turn your state into a right to work state and essentially prevent that kind of competition that you said, where Boeing's going to move from Washington to South Carolina just because it's easier to exploit workers there?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are labor laws that you can make, federal labor laws that say all workers have a right to unionize, and that employers will be penalized for anti-union activity. All of that stuff is absolutely implementable at the federal level. But you have this very corporate business friendly Democratic Party that is not the party of the workers that it often it wants to kind of paint this face that it's standing up to the working class. It's clearly the evidence is not there for that. But yes, you can do it at the federal level, and absolutely it's part of my platform that we need to do those things.
Well, you mentioned the Democratic Party a little bit, and I was also listening to an interview that you did over at the Left Flank Vets. Shout out to Left Flank Vets. Okay. And you mentioned that when in regards to whole Washington in particular, it's actually a lot of the state Democrats that are really resisting this policy and throwing up these roadblocks. You're really battling the Democratic Party, which is ironic given that they brand themselves as the party that's in favor of healthcare, not against healthcare. And I was just wondering what the fight is like on the ground in your district against the incumbent Democrat and against the Democratic Party in the area, and also just what the makeup of your district is. What kind of message is going to fly?
Yeah, I mean, we're a working class district. We're not a rich district by any standards. We have pockets of wealth as all districts do. But I think David. Oh, I remember that coal terminal also. And I was also writing an article, just to respond to David here for a second, sure, about him backing the Cherry Point refinery that was very much protested by the local community and the local tribes. And he fell back on just, well, we need to keep these jobs here. And as you know, fossil fuel industry jobs, there's not a ton of jobs there. Really what it comes down to is maintaining the fossil fuel industry in his state. So, I mean, that's what he's being paid to do, but yeah, acknowledging David's comment there. So, I mean, we're an 88% white district. There's not a whole lot of diversity here. We are fairly split between rural and urban. We've got Everett and Linwood are our big cities. The city where I live right now is one of the fastest growing areas of the country. In the last 20 years, my town has gone from, maybe 8,000 to 80,000. So really fast growing. A lot of that has to do with people being pushed out of Seattle because of the cost of land in Seattle has gotten so expensive, and that a lot of that land in Seattle, like old homes, have been bought up by corporations. They've been knocked down. They're putting up these high rises. They're also putting up a lot of really expensive condos that can cater to the tech class that works there. But it pushes the historical community out. It pushes the lower paying jobs out, who at one point may have been able to afford to live in city close to their work. Now they're pushed 2 hours north where I am. And I say 2 hours in a commute sense, because as you know, the rush hour is much worse than if I was just going to take a 1 p.m. drive down to Seattle, which would take me, 45 minutes. But, so it's pushing land values up here, and we're starting to get our local community, even though people are, the area is growing fast here. It's also, we have a homeless population that's growing fast also, because the land value is increasing here, subsequently to it increasing in Seattle. And now a lot of people here are being pushed out of their homes and into more rural areas. So it's just a pattern. All of that stuff could be halted if we had rent controls, if we had vacancy taxes in areas like Seattle, if we had laws that stopped old neighborhoods being knocked down for purely investment interests. But Seattle City Council is a very business friendly city council, unfortunately. But we've got Shama Sawant fighting for us, so that's
thank God, right? What a champ.
But honestly, my district is no different than most other districts. We have some unique features. We have a ton of coastline here. We do have our islands in the Puget Sound, so we have island communities, which the island communities tend to be a little bit wealthier, but it's still fairly rural. We have a lot of migrant farm workers here, a lot of agriculture in the district. We definitely have problems in this district with employers abusing immigrant labor and migrant labor. So we've got. I don't know that the struggles that this district faces are any different than others, but what I will say is, we are a pretty solid 2-to-1 blue to red split here. A Democrat is not going to lose this seat to a Republican. The closest Larsen came in the last 20 years was in 2010, when you had a huge wave of Democrats losing their seat. And why did those Democrats lose their seat en masse in 2010? It was because the Obama administration didn't right away, coming out of the recession, the 2008 market crash and recession, that he didn't right away go, I'm going to help the working class. And instead he bailed out all of his rich bankers.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty familiar situation. Yeah.
And so I'm sure you guys have probably talked about this with the way Biden is handling the first year of his administration. And we see his cabinet picks, and we see that he's a number of promises that he has made, he's now walking back and talking to Republicans.
Well, yeah, well, let's dig into that, Jason. I think that's worth plugging into, especially after you described your district, because you're right. The story that you've told us is the same story that we hear from a lot of progressive candidates, people who care about the working class and the constituents of their community, right? They're talking about how they're being pushed out of the urban epicenters, and housing is now going up in the places that they were once able to afford, if you weren't able to afford a place in the city. And now you're seeing a rise in homelessness, you're seeing a rise in displacement, or at the very least rent eating up a significant chunk of your income. And now after COVID, we've seen, just a massive amount of unemployment, job displacement, through no fault of people's own. They're now put in a precarious position where they might be months behind on rent. They've been promised this $2,000 check, which isn't enough. They haven't gotten it. What's the response like from people in your district? What are you hearing? And do you think it's gonna make it harder to run on a campaign where you're running on issues like giving people money, like helping people financially and doing things from the government? Because the last time they saw a Democrat promise them that, it didn't happen. Do you feel like you're more secure in that because you said that it's a blue for sure district?
Yeah, I think people here want to be. Now, I'm a pretty radical character. I mean, for a lot of the Democratic Party, and I've worked within the local Democratic Party organizations, I've always considered myself like a Democrat by default, like, because we have a two-party system. If I got to pick one of them, I'll pick the Democrats. I've certainly voted outside the Democratic Party to the left, but for the most part, I've really tried to be that push left person within the Democratic Party. The establishment hates me for it. They're the kind of person that when Biden got elected, and where Biden took office on day one, I was like, all right, time for this. And these are the brunch liberals, a lot of the brunch liberals who are like, can't you just be happy with we got rid of Trump? And I was like, no, bitches, now the real work starts. But they don't, that's very like, they're like, take it slow, you've got, things take time, Meanwhile, these are the people who are typically in control of the local party organizations and cheerleaders for people like Rick Larsen. They are the people who are comfortable in their homes. They're comfortable with their retirement. They've got their health insurance. They are not having the struggles of, the young people who are, getting ready to graduate high school and wondering what their prospects are for employment, wondering what their prospects are for job training or college education, whatever it might be, and how are you going to pay for it? I mean, it's become a real presence, student debt. I mean, kids are these days thinking to themselves, I don't want to go to college. And maybe that's the right thought anyway. Maybe they're not the right person to go to college. But we have pushed, and I say this as somebody who was a high school teacher for almost 20 years, the system pushes and pushes and pushes kids to go to college. But you know, the reality is a lot of kids, we don't prepare kids well enough for what an actual college experience is. You know, a lot of them are not supported enough to where they can make it past their first year, you know, and then they come out of college and they've got debt and they don't have a degree. And even if they go through the first 4 years, you know, they're looking at having to you know, it's just, you want to say to these people who are like, stop pushing, look back on, you know, you guys who went to college in the 60s and the early 70s, and how much the government actually subsidized you to do that, so that when you graduated, you weren't saddled with it. All these people were like, well, I paid off my loans. You know, when I went to college 30 years ago, it was like $8,000 a year. You know, now for University of Washington education, you're pushing like $25,000 a year. You know, and the wages have not gone up to afford that. So, you know, all sorts of economic problems for the working class in going to college. And I don't know what we were talking about really, but I went off on a rant.
Well, Jason, I had a question for you too. You mentioned Kshama Sawant earlier, the councilwoman from Seattle. And I've called her on this show potentially the best elected official in this entire country. I think she really
possibly.
Yeah, truly. And when it comes to progressives or socialists and, you know, positions of, you know, elected leadership, I think that she's really set the standard for me, at least, about how to approach this. You know, she's not on Twitter all day, you know, virtue signaling and putting out these nice messages. Well, she's not really doing much. She's actually getting shit done. You know, she's there.
She's organizing action.
Yeah, she organized action. She immediately got to work when she was there, you know, pressuring the Democratic Party to the left in a real significant and effective way. And she hasn't been taking any bullshit while doing it. And nice cat. But I was just wondering, and obviously she's just a city councilwoman, you know, she's not a congressperson. But I'm wondering, on if you were to get into Congress, you know, what kind of path do you see yourself taking when it comes to really effectively resisting the Democratic Party, its leadership, the establishment infrastructure that will certainly be, you know, up against all of your desired outcomes when it comes to policy? And I'm just wondering if you can lay out a strategic blueprint for your goal to actually make some of these things more obtainable, other than just, I'm going to sit here and wait around until there's enough other progressives in Congress so that we can vote. And I mean, that might be a more realistic, and, you know, maybe that's the real answer, but I think a lot of people want to hear, you know, a bold strategy that you have, something that separates you from the pack.
Well, you know, I really think Bernie said it. You know, if he was the president, he was not just going to be the commander in chief. He's going to be the organizer in chief. And, you know, I think that is something that the squad has going. I think AOC she's a great on the ground organizer. So I look at myself now, and I say this being able to, you guys know I'm a member of Whole Washington. You know, probably I've done a lot of organization for within the local Democratic Party to organize Bernie-crats so that they know how to take advantage of the power within the system. And, you know, I was a union activist. And so I really think that when you get into Congress, that job, if you come into it from a perspective like I have it, that stuff doesn't stop when you take office. In fact, I think it's more important to continue building those networks now that you've got a bigger platform. I think, you know, one, people, if I get elected, they're going to be electing me for a reason. You know, I am not going to get elected unless I can inspire enough of this district to say, we're done with stagnant government. We're done with a corporate representative who takes all the money from the industry and really doesn't vote for the things that we need for, is very performative in anything based in progressive ideals, always very performative. And so they're going to elect me precisely because I am the organizer that I have been for the last 30 years. And so one of the most important parts of that is that commitment to taking no corporate money. You know, it's not that I don't love talking to people like yourselves. And I think the independent media and the way you're growing independent media is really super important for our movement also. But I think it's important for me to come on your show and say, can I make you trust me that I am going to be that person? Because you know, when you're a progressive actor, the word grifter gets thrown around a lot. You know, well, we ran our campaign last year on a really bare bones budget, $50,000. None of my campaign got paid. We got more votes per dollar than almost any progressive, any progressive campaign that did no corporate money than I can think of. We got more votes per dollar, about 35,000 votes. So we did that here because we were able to convince a large enough people that we were the real deal, right? And there are a lot of people in district that I've told me, man, we didn't know that you were going to do so well. We might have voted for you if we'd known. So it's kind of a herd mentality sometimes. Yeah. But I think a lot of people in respect were like, whoa, he almost made the general election right there. That wasn't, because I had people call me, this is not a serious campaign, because I challenge the system. I'm constantly challenging the system. And so people think that my level of, like, I'm at 11 the whole fucking time, and people think that that's not serious. And I'm like, I think that's what people really want.
If your house is on fire, you got to act like your house is on fire.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think really we can take that message and expand on that message in this campaign season. And, we've got 2 years to do it. But I have really got to sell people on, I'm going to get in there and fight for you. Because people are very mistrusting of politicians. That's just the way it is. And for good reason.
It does look like you've earned yourself one supporter here. David says that he will be supporting you. So there you go, a worthy challenger.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, Jason, you kind of touched on something that I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, one of the things that excites me about your campaign is you're connecting the dots between these endless wars and their need to end. Not just because they're obviously immoral. There's no reason to be causing destruction overseas when we don't need to, but also because we fundamentally need to invest in our own families domestically. So many of our resources are being spent on, our overinflated military, right? We have bases in over 100 countries. We've, clearly prioritized a military budget among a budget that's going to be working for the people. Unfortunately, it seems like Joe Biden has, continued to kind of pilot the war machine, continued to kind of full throttle. It looks like he's sending more troops to Iraq, those sorts of things. I'm wondering, the American people seem pretty desperate to end these wars. One, is that something that you still hear about when you talk to voters? And two, I guess, how do you plan on bringing that fight to Washington if you're elected?
Well, I got my start in anti-war activism. I protested the first Iraq invasion back in 1990. I was 19 years old, and so I look at anti-war activism as really my bread and butter. But it really has taken a back seat to climate change and healthcare. I mean, there's no denying. So even though I'm still grounded in the anti-war movement, the real things affect, and unfortunately, it is because it affects our country. One, people look at the military as a jobs program. Kids coming out of high school who don't have any other prospects, they look at the military and say that's a way. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's criminal.
Well, we talked speaking of that, we talked to Erica from Left Flank Vets about that not too long ago.
Erica. Yeah. So kids are coming out without prospects, and they do look at the military as a jobs program. Well, the military should not be a jobs program. In terms of economy, about what we should be investing in our economy, we invest so much money in bullets and bombs, and these things have no return to society. They are fully items of destruction and degradation, and they provide no positive wealth, return to society, other than money in the pockets of the CEOs of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and so on. So there is an economy around the war machine, but it's not beneficial to the greater economy. It is actually a real money sink. It's a money sink in terms of unaccountable contractors, unaccountable weapons manufacturers. It's part of the money suck up into the top 1%. I mean, it really is. And on top of that, it is the tool of global imperialist oppression. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I would like to do what I can to spend my time on the floor of Congress to talk about those things which you do not hear many people talk about, because everybody is really deferential to these authoritarian and violent institutions like police and like the military.
Yeah, and obviously we were just talking about, college tuition and the need for free college. I mean, it's pretty obvious why we don't have free college, because it keeps, kids funneling into the military. It keeps people, occupying those roles when they are desperate for healthcare and they're desperate for education and a path to making something of themselves, and they're told that this is the right path. And definitely a very complex issue that is really unfortunate the way it exploits the most vulnerable among us. Jason, we really appreciate this conversation. We're so glad to have heard some more details about your campaign. We're hoping that you succeed this time and make it into that general election, take out the incumbent. If anyone wants to support you, callforcongress.com is Jason's URL. You can go donate and check out his policies there. Great stuff. And as I mentioned, Jason is also a board member of Whole Washington. We're about to be inviting on some more activists, Laura Fielding of Red Berets for Medicare for All, as well as Andre Stackhouse, who is also an activist working with Whole Washington. So, Jason, you're more than welcome to stay around for as long as you please.
I would love to join in with Laura and Andre, at least for the first maybe 15 minutes, and
absolutely
throw my perspective in on Whole Washington. I don't want to eat up their time so much, but Laura and Andre are fantastic. Laura has been a huge supporter of my campaign for the last 2 years. She's an amazing person.
Yeah, well, that sounds great to us. Before we change gears, I guess, was there any last note that you would like to make for while we stay specifically on the topic of your campaign?
No, I mean, anybody who's listened to me for the last half an hour knows who I am, what I'm going to fight for. I don't take any crap from the establishment. We do need funding. If I could throw out any appeal for somebody to kick my campaign $5 and do it in a recurring way, that's the way our campaign is sustained. There is a donate link there. If you're local, you can sign up to volunteer. We are going to do things differently this year. We are going to go out. We are going to knock on doors. It did hurt us in the last campaign. We held back because of COVID. We thought it was the right thing to do. Turned out, had we been out there on the streets, because we did have an active volunteer base who was waiting for the word for us, and we just we're going to get in trouble. It's not safe, and it hurt us, but we're going to do things safely and get out there and make sure that we make that wider impact.
Yeah, and it takes so many candidates 2 times anyway that I think that first run was probably good to build name recognition, and hopefully you can really expound on some of your ideas and really generate a presence and some excitement behind said ideas in your campaign.